Hi, I'm Louisa Nicola, clinical neuroscientist and brain performance coach. With my company, Neuro Athletics, we're looking at the intersection of neuroscience and elite athleticism. And on today's episode, we're going to be speaking about all the different ways that you can learn about neuroscience and increase your brain performance. We're going to be going into nootropics, sleep, insulin resistance, and much more.
3, 2, 1.
All the lights are on.
I like that.
Welcome. Louisa Nicola, welcome to the show. So glad to have you here in town on your little West Coast tour.
Yeah.
What brings you to LA?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me.
Of course.
What brings me to LA?
Yeah.
Look, I've been living in New York for the past 4 years, and if you know anything about New York right now, it is absolutely horrible to be in.
December's a little tricky.
It's very tricky, especially when you're not going to a day job every single day due to the pandemic. So, it's snowing, it's crazy, and I was like, I've just got to get out. So I'm here for the next 2 weeks and just by default doing a little bit of a podcast tour.
That's right,
which is amazing.
Sharing the good neuroscience word.
Absolutely. So, it's so beautiful being here.
I would love to kind of get started with defining our terms, because your area of expertise and what you've kind of made your life's passion, it has a lot of fundamental principles I think anybody can understand.
Yeah.
But also there's some deep-rooted technicalities in science.
Yeah.
So please, if you could, I would love to get your definition. What is neuroscience? Like, what is your life? What is your work all about? What is this thing?
So first and foremost, when we think about neuroscience, we think about the brain and some of the terms, and that was actually really good to start off by really defining the terms, because
Nailed it. All right.
with the way that we're going to go through this podcast, it's really crucial to understand, what are we talking about? When we talk about the way I view the world is through the lens of neuroscience, meaning
Interesting.
We have this beautiful system, okay? This system that you and I are both privileged to have as humans. It's called the nervous system. It defines who we are, what we do. Everything that we have done up until this point is really defined on how well our nervous system is functioning. Now, when we talk about the nervous system, we're talking about two things. We're talking about the central nervous system, which is the brain and spinal cord.
Okay.
Then the peripheral nervous system, which is all the nerves that connect the central nervous system to the skeletal muscle and the organs of the body. Okay. Then within the peripheral nervous system, it's further subdivided into the autonomic, okay, and the somatic nervous system. So somatic meaning the body, skeletal muscle. Autonomic meaning it comes from the word automatic, which is a very controversial term, because in some ways it's not entirely automatic. And that takes care of the voluntary and involuntary movements.
Okay.
And then within the autonomic nervous system, it's further divided into the sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system, which we all hear about in everyday life. We know that there is a fight or flight response. We know that there's a rest and digest. That is the sympathetic and the parasympathetic nervous system. And a really easy way to think about it is the sympathetic nervous system is our level of alertness. When we're speeding up everything, our blood pressure rises, our heartbeat rises. It's speeding up the process to hopefully evolutionarily run away from a tiger.
Things
or a
that allow
lion.
like executing, action, movement, energy.
Absolutely, and that's where digestion stops. Yeah. And then we've got the parasympathetic nervous system. So sympathetic means sympa, meaning together. Para means near. It's actually the Greek word for near is butter. So it's So I just want to throw in a little bit of a Greek
your background
analogy
as
just
well.
there.
Yeah,
absolutely. And the
so you could say this is all in your blood. You've had no
absolutely, just like mathematics. But the parasympathetic nervous system is that calming state, and that's basically when you talk about neuroscience, it's talking about the science of the nervous system. And we can use it in so many different aspects of life, and there are so many amazing discoveries that have been made from neuroscience labs, and I just can't wait to further go into it with you.
I have a couple different paths in getting to know more of you and your content that I would love to kind of, I'll say, compartmentalize this audio and video experience here. In one avenue, you've created a very unique application for people that want to know more about this. The high-performing executives, athletes, weekend warriors, people that are looking to not only better understand the human body, but they're looking for that understanding because they need higher output. They need or want just, that edge. So in this world of athletics, this world of health and fitness, where does neuroscience fit in?
So it's a very brand new topic, I believe. And I really think that everything I'm studying now is at the forefront of that topic.
Yeah.
And if I can, I'm going to deviate and tell you a bit about my past, which will probably enable you to understand a bit more about who I am and what I do and why. So,
because you have the athletic background.
I do.
Yeah.
Definitely not the same athlete I was 10 years ago, but I was a triathlete. And I raced pretty competitively for Australia. So I was on the Australian team, and I qualified for Beijing, and also Beijing 2011 and 2012 Auckland.
Wow.
So it was my heart and soul. So I grew up as a swimmer, and it was just a natural deviation for me to go into a sport that really challenged me. So it's always been athletics. It's always been athleticism. And I bring that story up a lot because if anybody knows about triathlon, you know that you are training for 3 sports. It's rigorous. We were training 40 hours a week. I built a really close relationship with my team and with my coach. And my coach was really pivotal in my understanding of, I would say, neuroscience, athleticism, and physiology. And he was a physiologist, an exercise physiologist. So I was very young, 17, 18, really learning about it. He used to, everything we used to do every single day was really backed by science.
Oh, sure, yeah.
And so at the age of 18, I really got into it, and that's how I started my academic career. So I went into sports physiology. I really understood the science behind it, and I was really loving it. Testing myself, testing the barriers every single day, doing everything I could to be better on the road, in the water, even transition. So,
like transition meaning going from land to sea to
absolutely.
Okay,
and that's they call that the 4th sport of triathlon.
Yeah, I can see that.
Yeah, so we used to actually do brick sessions, which is literally just training for transition.
Wow.
So 2011, it was 2 weeks before Beijing. So we were out doing a ride with the team, and I actually got hit by a car. And so
on a bike,
yes.
Wow.
Which is, they all cyclists say you're not a true cyclist unless you've been hit by a car. But that was, I think that was the turning point for me because an
unfortunate rite of passage, I guess.
Absolutely, I had to forfeit my title. Everything I worked for my entire life, it was my heart and soul just gone. I was flying out to Beijing 2 weeks later, but I couldn't do it. Obviously, I had to have some surgeries, and I really wanted to compete again. And the doctors were like, "You're barely going to walk." I was like, "No, there's got to be a way for me to I knew I could get my body back. I knew I could do that." And this was in 2011. And there was talk of neuroscience within this space. And I met a man. He flew in from Colorado. He was actually Usain Bolt's running coach at the time. He flew in from Colorado to do, with our team, to do a run session. And he said to me, "I think that if you focus on your brain via a thing called neuroplasticity, you'll be able to get your body back to where you had it previously. I think that you've got to get past the fear barriers." I said, "What are you talking about?" And he first introduced me to this thing called the EEG, electroencephalogram, where electrodes are placed on your head at different locations, and they measure the brainwave activity. And we're doing this now, obviously, in all aspects of life, especially in hospitals, in private settings. And that really paved the way for me to understand neuroscience. And that's when I decided in 2011, I said, I'm going to dedicate my entire life to understanding this beautiful organ. And so I did. So went on to further do my master's and then into science and medicine. And I'm still going.
Definitely got the background, got the experience for damn sure.
Yeah, but there is this. So then it was interesting because around 2014, I started working with teams in Australia. I didn't really know, I wanted to work with their mind.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to work with their brain. It wasn't really, the response was great, but people were like, we still don't understand what you're doing. And I wanted to, it was like, I said, I would approach coaches, especially like high league coaches in Australia, and say, I think I can get your players to perform better, think faster, and win the game, on game day, by working with their brain. And
not actually training them in, like, we're not on the track and field, we're not on this in the swim tank, we're not actually training the way that most people probably would think.
Yeah, absolutely. And so that's where I really got my start. I started my company, Neuro Athletics, and it's I call it the intersection of neuroscience and athleticism. Mm-hmm. It's not very well studied. I'm hoping to bring more attention and awareness to that. And this is the way I see high-level athletes. We know that athletes, there's three pillars to elite athleticism. We know that there's the physiological, which is the training of the cardiovascular system and the anaerobic system, and then we know that there is psychological. So we all know with sports psychology, how do we train the athlete to become more aroused, less aroused? How do we get them to be calm, alert? We knew that. Okay, then we also know that the third pillar was the tactical and technical. Basically, what are the different skills needed for you to perform well on game day in your specific sport? Hockey,
refining
swimming,
those very
refining,
tactile
absolutely.
skills.
Now, over the last, I would say, 5 to 6 years, with the rise of technology, especially neurotechnology such as fMRI, MRI, EEG, QEEG, we now have greater understanding to unlock that fourth dimension. I call that the neurological dimension. And if we can really get our players, even if you're a coach, if we can really understand the importance of the brain and the nervous system in not just controlling our movement, our emotions, but how can we really get better in 3 specific areas on the court, that's probably going to make the difference between, the being number 1 and maybe being number 3. So that's where I'm involved in. It's it's that kind of 1% difference.
Amazing.
Yeah.
And I'm just going to kind of think out loud here to really kind of help better understand this stuff and to convey it for the listener and viewer here. The tactical aspect, the physical aspect. There are so many ways, as you were talking, for some reason, the deadlift came to mind. And, there are the fundamentals, and then there's kind of like the, tapping into the inner chain, I call it, of, all right, lining up, and you can kind of even walk through head to toe, posterior chain, you walk up, hey, is this retracted?
Like biomechanically.
Exactly, yeah. Understanding once you understand the human body and the biomechanics of what needs to move and how, it's almost like you can tap into that muscle, those muscle groups, and like you get a better kind of more fluid, not only understanding, but movement.
Yeah.
Is neuroscience and athleticism, is it kind of like that? Like kind of, I'm struggling to even kind of like say this. Is it really kind of becoming aware of the level to which our brains are playing a role in our performance to kind of like hack it? To become aware of what it's doing, like I was talking about with understanding the biomechanics of muscles?
Yeah, absolutely. I think I try and not go near that word hack.
Okay.
And it's more so, it's working on a model of not the Western medicine model, which is get an injury, put a Band-Aid on it and move on. It is more preventative. And it's involved in what can we know about the nervous system and the brain? How can you come up with a specific structure and some strategies to manage your state management? How can you manage your sleep? How can you manage your level of arousal when you're feeling angry, when you're feeling sad, when you may, so you don't seep into depression? How can we manage all these things? So in case something occurs on game day, we know how to mitigate it. We know how to fight it. And these are the types of things that I believe is really at the center of neuroscience and athleticism. And that's that's for everybody to know. Everybody wants to know. You don't have to be an athlete. We all have a brain. Right. Everyone says, I always say, if you have a brain, you can come
Neuroscience
here.
is for you.
That's exactly right. Because we all do. We all have a brain. Most of us, we all have a nervous system, spinal cord, and we all want to know how to have a better life. How can we sleep better? How can we perform better? And I really believe that that the brain is the center. It's the brain comes first. It controls everything in the body.
What, in your experience, in your practical application, or even your studies, have you found to really kind of be one of the biggest aha moments of maybe we didn't know that the brain actually did have this much influence over what we were doing or not doing? Have you had any kind of like big moments like that has kind of solidified your work?
Yeah. So in 2011, during the time when I was actually first getting into it, there was a study produced, and it was trying to debunk the lactate myth. We know the lactate myth. And what happened was they used an EEG. So they hooked the EEG up to a bunch of cyclists. I think there was maybe a 60-person study. And what they did was they were managing their threshold. And what they found was, so you've got an area in your brain, the back of your brain, on the side, called the insular cortex, and that's involved in a lot of interoception. So sensory, like being aware of sensory things. Then we've also got our prefrontal cortex, obviously decision making. It's the control center of the brain. And so what they found was, and that's where the motor cortex is. Okay, what they found was when these cyclists were near threshold, when they're just about to give up, when they just cannot exert anymore, which is what people call, I've got all this lactic acid building up in my legs. What they found is that the insular cortex had a heightened level of activity. Okay, now what happens? So the brain was
signaling more.
Well, yes, and the thing I want to make note of is the direction of the pattern. So it goes insular cortex, which shoots through to the motor cortex, which then shoots down into the body, into the muscles to move.
Interesting.
Okay, then the muscles then say, oh, I'm getting tired, so then it shoots up, and it just keeps going like that. But what they found was it is not the lactic acid in the body, in the legs, that is stopping the cyclist at threshold. It is this heightened level
in the back.
It's this heightened level of activity from the insular cortex to the motor cortex. And that was a really pivotal moment in this aspect, because then we're like, well, so therefore this and then they started to do studies saying, well, if lactic acid is a real thing and that's what stops you at threshold, what happens if we inject you with lactic?
Interesting.
And they did that and nothing happened. And they were like, okay, wow.
So it's kind of like that workload and buildup that kind of keeps this coach in the background monitoring levels, and only then does it trigger a response to, hey, stop, but just having it doesn't.
Yeah. And so what does that mean? That means, well, wow, so what if I train this area of the brain? What if I really train it? What if I feed it well nutritionally? What if I sleep well? What if I do, what if I drink well? What if I manage my level of stress and cortisol? What's that going to do for the brain? Will it grow it like we do with our, we want stronger biceps. So what do? We place a lot of load in there. We build up the muscle and it becomes stronger.
Yeah. How do you train the brain?
Really good question. Yeah. So that's what my entire company is. So we have what we call a Neuro Athletic method. So training the brain, well, we can look at it in many different ways. And one way that we really find is extremely useful, both scientifically and in practicality, is this use of, for example, we'll go in and we'll do a protocol with a bunch of NFL players and we'll get them to use left brain, right brain. So we know that the left brain controls the right side of the body, right side controls the left side of the body. So we're doing like a lot of reaction training drills, peripheral training drills, really trying to not just involve all of the senses, auditory, visual. We're not trying to just look at that sort of stimulus, but we're also trying to include a number of different brain body based exercises.
So it's really just how many different parts of the body can we get the brain to try to navigate at the same time?
Absolutely.
Okay.
So when you think about processing speed, when you're on the court, you really have to be an intelligent player, I call it. You have to really process, okay, the ball's coming. I have to react to the ball, and not just I have to act really intelligently. So how can we really train that? And one of the big things that falls under that is the visual system. So, and obviously we'll definitely go more into that as the podcast goes on.
Yeah, I'd love to kind of walk through that. So, we're understanding what's going on physiologically, which is step number one. Yeah. And step number two is then, all right, I want to improve an area, so I'm going to target that area. You've been talking about different things, of left brain, right brain, different proprioception. One thing I'll kind of throw in, I'm curious if it actually works, is actually just using, like I am trying to train my brain, I guess, more using my left hand for things versus I'm right hand dominant. Brushing my teeth with my left hand, using my left hand for different things, and just really doing things that are seemingly normal, but in an uncomfortable state, and only because it's not how my brain is used to doing them. Is that also what you're talking about?
Absolutely. So it's your brain is always looking for the easy way out.
Yeah.
It never wants to be.
It's so lazy.
It's very lazy.
It takes up the most amount of energy, but it wants to just stay lazy the whole time. It's crazy.
Yeah, and if we don't train it to do specific things, we're really going to, I would say, quote unquote, atrophy in that certain aspect of life. Not really atrophy, but if we want to be able to be calmer, we have to practice that. We can't just say, okay, be calm. We really have to practice that. We have to do something, very often, I would say consistently, for your brain to undergo a process called neural plasticity. So the brain's ability to change and adapt from different experiences. That can be both good and bad. So if we put ourselves under really bad experiences often, then we're just going to have this natural occurrence to be able to do that without having to think about it. That's what neuroplasticity is. That's why we call it, there's that 10,000 hour rule. Do something 10,000. I used to do that with the bike. I used to think, let's just keep spinning.
Build that muscle memory.
Memory. So with Neuro Athletics, we do a number of different things with protocols. But the way we start is we scan all of the brains of our athletes, okay? And we're working with event-related potentials. So that means what's happening in the brain during a specific event.
Okay.
So, for example, we'll have a player look at a screen, and there'll be many different stimulus coming up. Whether it's whether they're balls, whether they're checkers flying, whether it's a noise, really engaging.
Simulating something that they're going to be going through in their sport, in their profession,
Absolutely. And they may have to hit a target.
Okay.
And what happens is that's an event. Okay, so hitting the right target is an event. So we have the equipment now to pick up on what was the speed that you hit that. That's an event-related potential. So it takes a snapshot. And we're able to then gauge an understanding of what did you score in terms of attention, in terms of memory, in terms of auditory, and in terms of visual. So we then get a snapshot of those 4 areas. And we say, okay, this is where you're sitting, 0.001, and I want you faster than that. So we're going to undergo a protocol over the next 12 weeks, brain-body-based exercises, and a number of different other things that we'll look into. And then we're going to rescan, and we're going to see if you've improved in those areas. And, more often than not, they do.
This poses a question for me. Is the limiting factor for the human potential physical, or is it all in our head? Is it all in our brain? That's
a really hard question, because then you've got to take into consideration, some disease states that, really paralyze us, ALS, for example. And
my father passed away from ALS.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
I'm so sorry to hear that.
I mean, this no, I thank you for that. But that's the whole, quick little tangent story. Ever Ford was his life's mantra. It was his phrase our entire life growing up, and then he even more so embodied it during the 18-month diagnosis. He passed away in 2005. Yeah.
I would just like to tell you that the reason why I brought that up is because right now...
Yeah, it's a very random thing. It's a very rare thing to bring up. Interesting.
No, I'm working on so I'm completing my doctorate, and in order to do that, I am doing a number of different... I'm publishing a number of different articles along with a lot of... board-certified physicians over in New York and in Boston. And the paper that we're working on now is an ALS paper.
No way.
And it's been, I worked on it yesterday for 7 hours.
Wow.
So I actually went through probably about 30 different studies, and I've just been, and it's all just, my whole head right now is ALS. So and it's very interesting to know that, very interesting and sad and frustrating for everybody who's probably been affected by the disease to know that 95% of all those diagnosed with ALS is sporadic, 5% is familial. And that's really poses that question of why is it sporadic? So that's what we're really working on and looking at some therapeutic.
Well, thank you for your work on that. I'll even throw another monkey wrench in there. When we found out, and when he passed away, I went through a lot. But one of the things I went through was kind of trying to understand it.
Yeah.
And before I even got into, we'll bring it back to the conversation here. We'll get back on topic. Before I even got into kind of understanding the science, and truly, really, his passing in ALS was a big catalyst and reason why when I was injured as well. I was injured in the military, got medically discharged, had to learn how to walk again twice. And that plus my father's illness of what I lost physically and what my father lost due to that neurological disease was the reason why I studied it when I got out. And another statistic that I found out, which was great for me, right? Another military guy, military males have a 30% higher chance of contracting it versus the general public. So there's so much going on, not only physically, neurologically, but just environmentally, I think, with ALS in particular, that is worth to check out.
Absolutely. And just for the audience to understand a bit more, ALS is like motor neurons disease, so it affects the upper and motor neurons. It's ALS is shortened for amyotrophic lateral sclerosis, where it's affecting the motor neurons of the upper motor neurons and the lower motor neurons. And statistically speaking, somebody who is diagnosed with ALS has a 3 to 5 year window. So it's progressive. It's neurodegenerative. It's extremely sad, and obviously we know that it was coined, from Lou Gehrig's
disease. Yeah, famous baseball player.
Absolutely. So there's but no, thank you for sharing that story with me.
Oh, no, of course. It's the whole reason why I'm here, for sure. But to bring it back on point, I was asking, is our human potential, are we most limited by our physical state of being, our physical sense, or is it more the brain? I guess my even deeper rooted question is, are we training the right organ? Are we training the right thing, for maybe what we want out of life?
It depends. Look, everybody, I really believe that we're not, and hopefully with the rise of people speaking out about neuroscience and neuroscience education, we're coming to a bit more of an understanding of the power of the brain and mind. When I first started looking into this field, I used to separate it, the mind and the brain. It's a very outdated, Freudian view, and with more education, I was able to now be like, okay, they're extremely connected, just like the body and the brain is extremely connected. But what happens is we are all prone to diseases, just like cancer. We all have cancer. It's just, are you going to trigger the cancer doing certain things? Maybe, maybe not. We're all prone to depression, for example, except for the ones who are, and I must say, clinically diagnosed. But we're all prone to depression. And if we don't have certain practices in our life every single day, you and myself, we can definitely fall into that. So instead of, I am always believing, this is what I believed back in my early days of training, how can we prevent everything? And there's so many different things that we can be doing to manage our states, our emotions. And one of the biggest things that I've loved learning about recently, as of the start of this year, I've been getting into sleep. I do a lot of...
You're speaking my love language.
Look, it's... I never used to believe in it. And when I was like 20, I remember I did a triathlon and I came second. But the night before, I was probably like 22 at the time. The night before, I went out with all my friends and I was, drinking vodka cruises, and I remember
the night before,
and I was like, I'll never tell my coach this, but how I managed to get up and do that with little sleep and having alcohol in my body. Now, if I have a glass of wine, I'm like definitely out for a few days.
Few days.
Yeah,
Wow.
I'm like, it really affects me. I don't drink actually. I don't drink that much now, but.
It's so true. I mean, so many things, which it's a whole other episode. So many things, as we age, our body can no longer tolerate much less, especially if we're seeking that performance edge as well. Yeah,
no, absolutely. So sleep. Let's talk about it, because I brought my iPad here because I've got this recent study.
Yeah, what's going on between the worlds of sleep and neuroscience?
Oh, wow.
How does our understanding and studying the brain also understanding and studying sleep?
Well, first and foremost, as you can see, I've and for the people who are watching on the video, I've got two. I've got the Whoop
double
watch.
dipping too, Whoop and Apple Watch.
You've got the Apple, and I've also over this side I've got the Garmin, and so I'm constantly tracking and measuring my HRV, my sleep, my steps. I'm a bit crazy like that, but my sleep really specifically, using wearables. And to understand sleep is such a beautiful thing. I really understood it to be, okay, sleep is, it started off with, I feel better when I sleep. Why do I feel better when I sleep? Well, I wanted to get into the science, and the thing that really changed my life was this one study, and I'm going to talk about it right now.
Amazing. Okay.
It's produced in this article, in this journal called PNAS.
And I'll have to get this from you, and I'll link it down in the show notes, video notes for everybody to check out as well.
So the way it was, they did a study, okay, and they grew, I don't know how many individuals, but it was a group of healthy adults. They limited them to 6 hours of sleep a night.
Limited
them.
A lot of people right now are wishing they could get 6 hours.
Well, see, that's the general. When you think about that, that's the average population.
Yeah.
6 hours of sleep a night for 7 days, only 1 week. This is what they found. It is absolutely mind-blowing. Okay, this will change your life.
Yeah.
They found that with these individuals, they then took the subjects and they got a plasma sample. So they drew some blood and they looked at their genotype. Okay, they found that there was a change in 711 genes due to the lack of sleep.
Oh my God.
Now you think about this, okay?
And just, again, 1 week, it was 7 days.
7 days.
Wow.
Now, in the human genome, we have around 20,000 genes, okay? So when you look at 711, okay, if we do the math very quickly, I'm guessing that's around 3%, okay, of your genome that's changed. And out of those 700, what they found is that the ones that were, there was ones that were upregulated and ones that were downregulated, meaning ones that the downregulated ones was the immunity ones, meaning that the ones who, from the plasma sample, we look at the genes that are involved in immunity, they were suppressed. So they were downregulated. The ones that were upregulated were the genes involved in tumor progression and growth. And that shows that there can be an epigenetic change in sleep deprivation.
I don't know if I want to know anymore because I feel like it's going to send me down a biohacking or a biometric, epigenetic, just huge rabbit hole. That's insane in just a short amount of time.
Yeah, and look, just to clarify, that was Matthew Walker, who is an amazing sleep scientist, and I follow his work, and he was the one who actually...
Why We Sleep, right?
Why We Sleep, fantastic book.
Amazing book,
And he was the one that was talking about this, saying that you can actually get an epigenetic change from lack of sleep, and that is... I just think that is such a powerful metric to know that you're changing your human genome with, right now we look at things like genetically modified foods. We look at how can we change the human genome with this and that, but you're changing your human genome by lack of sleep. So that was the first thing that was really like, oh crap.
Yeah.
Oh Jesus. So it's like, okay, let's fix that up.
Yeah.
Then other things like when you think about neurotoxins, for example. So I posted
Which are
something.
what, by the way?
So toxins that affect the central and peripheral nervous system. So the nervous system, they build up in the brain and they become neurotoxic. So they say that we've got like a dirty brain, for example.
Yes.
So
pro-inflammatory.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So we have this, we have a lymphatic system, okay, in the body. It wasn't until recently, and by recently, I'm talking like maybe in the last 10 years or less, scientists discovered that there is this thing called the glymphatic system, which I posted about, and I post a lot about this. And what that is it's a system in our brain that enables the toxins to be exchanged with the cerebral spinal fluid, and the cerebral spinal fluid we know is then excreted through vents, which are in the brain, which are just ventricles. So this means that we can now clean our brain, okay, via this system. Now, they put subjects, and when I say subjects, in neuroscience, it's really important to differentiate between human controls and mice, and this study was done on mice.
Okay.
They found that the glymphatic system is only activated during deep sleep, slow wave sleep, and deep rest. And also, just to add on that, they also found that the mice, the lymphatic system was actually even more heightened, not just in deep sleep, but when they were in the lateral position.
Really?
Yeah, rather than the side. So
interesting.
So that was really interesting. It's even more. And so with this system, what happens is when you go into deep rest, your glial cells, glia is a type of nerve cell, neuron, it comes from the Greek word glue,
There you
because
go.
they bind together, and they shrink, which enables the cerebral spinal fluid to then push through even further and clean itself out. So then you're not having that brain fog in the morning. Now, what happens with neurotoxins when they do build up in the brain? Well, we know that things like phosphorylated. Do you know much about Alzheimer's disease?
A little bit. Well, I mean, in terms of, we know it kind of starts up in the brain.
So that,
very
yeah,
pro-inflammatory, degenerative, due to a lack of the brain's ability over time to kind of deal with this cleansing process.
Absolutely. So we've got beta amyloid proteins in the brain. What happens is they...
Thank you for asking. You could tell the look on my face. I was like, I don't know that word.
I was like, I don't want to go too further.
Alzheimer's I got, but that word was new for me. Thank you.
Well, the pathogenesis of that is phosphorylated amyloid proteins in the brain, and what happens is they aggregate, they clump together in what we call plaques and tangles. Okay, they clump together, and that in turn causes neuronal death. So then you get, clumps of it, and it causes that area of the brain to die and break down, and that's why it's neurodegenerative.
Right.
So
which
it
then causes your
dies
brain to
over
have to
time.
make up for it. That's why you're not firing as quickly, because those neurons are actually dying.
They die, and then over time, you can imagine if a lot of parts of the brain dies down. That's why at the end stages of Alzheimer's disease, which is a horrible disease, but it's you see the patient first, lose memory, lose sight, lose touch, lose a lot of other things. So what happens if we don't clean out these toxins? Well, it's said that, this is how toxins build up.
That's where it starts.
And aggregate, and that's where it starts. And there's phenomenal research being done in the areas of Alzheimer's disease and sleep, sleep and insulin resistance, sleep and emotional states, sleep and how many calories you take in. So this study is absolutely amazing.
That was some of the, I've looked into some work on that as well, and it's just fascinating, the biomarker levels of when you're sleep deprived, of your the complete imbalance of leptin and ghrelin.
Absolutely.
And so, I mean, you're actually not really that hungry. You're sleep deprived for many people.
Yeah.
I mean, the brain drives the ship for so many systems,
Yeah.
all the systems.
And so in the last year, when I started to really research about this and really looking at peer-reviewed journals, in really, really good journals such as Cell, Nature, you understand the impacts of sleep deprivation. So my entire day, if you asked me, what is the main focus of my day from the moment I wake up? It's how do I prime myself to sleep? And I always say sleep starts from the night before.
Absolutely.
If you've had a bad night the night before, it's going to impede on the following night's sleep.
Yeah.
And then I think when we look at sleep, it's also really important to differentiate, because I just brought in some numbers. It's important to differentiate sleep quality versus sleep quantity. And there's, which we're not going to go into, but there's there's many different forms of stages of sleep, I should say, and we're really looking at getting into that slow wave REM sleep where we're doing all of the memory consolidation, restorative. And when it comes to the athlete, we really want them to be able to get into a deep sleep. So when we look at sleep, I've just brought up the lymphatic system. I've just brought up the change in epigenetics. So I think there are two major things to pick up on. And then the third, which will really relate to absolutely everybody, is I referred to it earlier. I said neural plasticity, okay? The brain's ability to wire and rewire from experience. So we want to go and learn a skill. You want to learn a new language. I want to learn a new sport. We go and perform that skill. And we think that, okay, great. I did that. I did 2 hours of training today for that skill. I should be able to.
I put in the time. I put in the reps.
Yeah. That skill isn't actually embedded into your brain until you sleep. So actual neuroplasticity takes place, like the penetration takes place during deep rest.
Wow.
During deep sleep, and you can get into it during deep rest if you were able to just maybe take a nap and get into that stage. And so that should be another reason to sleep more.
I remember reading about this.
Sleep better, I should say.
Good catch. In Why We Sleep, as well as I'm sure you're familiar with Jim Quick's work. his book Limitless. It was this great analogy of all these things, like to your point of we can be putting in the reps all day long, but that's just short-term memory bank building. It's okay, then how much of that are we actually going to store and keep so that the next day when we show up, are we starting from scratch or are we starting at 90%? Well, during sleep is when it gets moved to, the back of the brain for that like deep memory storage and becoming that muscle memory kind of stuff instead of having to try to learn a new skill, maybe not all over again, but, you could really condense down that learning curve.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And there's been many different companies that have tried to, bring out wearables and technology for anything, for like, improving sleep function. And I always say, let's just work on the things that prepare yourself for sleep. Don't look at a screen from 10 p.m. I would say to like 4 a.m. I think that window is.
Walk us through some fundamentals here. The neuroscientist walkthrough for sleep health here.
Oh, look, I have a pretty rigorous routine, which was it's actually better here because we know that we've got a circadian rhythm. We all have that. It's a 24-hour cycle. And I know that for me, being here in LA, as soon as I wake up during sunrise, I go outside and I take it in the sunrise. So that
I do the same thing right here, this balcony.
It's absolutely beautiful. I keep looking out
minutes,
there.
Yeah.
And it signifies to your brain, okay, I'm awake. And we get a little surge in cortisol in the first thing in the morning. And that's like, okay, great, I'm up. And
time to get moving.
And so in terms of having a night routine, I think that's just as important. We talk about what's your morning routine. And I think, well, what's your night routine? How are you preparing for bed? How are you preparing to get into deep sleep? There are a number of different things I do. First of all, room temperature is a really big one. We know that in order to get into deep sleep, we can't be really in an environment that is raised. So we can't be hot, for example. We want to be cool. And then, because of when scientists figure that out, that's when marketing companies bring out things like the chili pad, for example. It's like, okay.
Or energy bills go up because everybody's cranking up the AC.
It's interesting, yeah. So that's one thing. Second thing is I wear an eye mask. I'm almost addicted to, I will not sleep without my eye mask. You're the same?
I have one here. I keep one in my travel bag.
Yeah.
I have one at my in-laws.
Everywhere.
Yeah.
So they're things that we can do to when we're actually, the mechanics of sleep. But what are we doing before sleep? So, when you prime your body, you warm up. You're not just going to go out and do a sprint. You're going to do some activation drills, maybe do some warm-ups. It's the same as sleep. What are you doing an hour? If you want to know that you want to be asleep by 10 p.m., you should start to wind down maybe at like 8:30, maybe. Okay, stop. You finished eating, so digestion has already, happened. Hopefully, it's finished, and you're turning off the things that are really high functioning. So you don't want to be answering emails. You don't want to be doing anything too crazy at night. You don't want to be looking at a screen. Maybe you want to read a book, and then you can start to dim the lights as well, and really try and prime your brain to be like, hey, getting ready to sleep, you know what to do.
Gentle nudge. Hey,
let's
wind down. Absolutely.
I always say that my best friend is my brain.
Yeah.
And when it upsets me, I'm like, this is not pretty. Come on, you got to work with me here. So I am a fan. I would say when it comes to nootropics, I get asked a lot, like, do you supplement with melatonin? And, we've all got melatonin. And so to really supplement with it, it's not a bad thing, but I do it to keep up with jet lag. So
what's your sense of melatonin? I when sleep began to kind of get more on my radar, I would take it. I was hooked on very tasty, probably not that great of a healthy choice, gummies. But then
of course,
that's how they get me. But then I began to kind of study it more, and I'm personally of the stance that it's good in very, very short-term doses, but then be mindful because it can actually downregulate your body's natural ability. And it's really not my immediate go-to for sleep aids. What's your stance on melatonin?
So there's so many studies that's being done. Something interesting that I learned is they did a study on melatonin and its effects on high-level athletes. They really wanted them to get into deep sleep, and they were supplementing with I think it was like 500, 600 milligrams.
Oh, wow.
And they just went into a deep sleep. So obviously they didn't, nothing really bad occurred. Okay. But they were doing this via a suppository.
Interesting.
So for anybody who doesn't know what a suppository is, it doesn't go through the mouth. It goes up through the the rectum.
Oh, so they could get like the full dosage.
Yeah, so it actually
Wow.
gets absorbed
Most
into your system.
bioavailability.
Because what happens if we ingest it through just an oral, we actually lose 2 milligrams. So if you're taking 10 milligrams, you're really, it's really having an 8 milligram effect. You're losing it. So that was, so that's one thing. And when we're talking about melatonin, we know that it's a hormone that we naturally secrete, and it's helping us go to sleep, not keep us asleep. Okay. And so I know that when I supplemented with the 5 milligrams, I went to sleep. I was like, oh my God, out like a light. And then I'd wake up 4 hours later, and it was like really troubling. So my happy medium is the 10 milligram that I use when I'm traveling. And unfortunately, I travel a lot, even during the pandemic, just due to work. So that's been my experience, and I'm not against it. And I'm also not going out and advocating that everybody go and get it with anything.
I love that this kind of disclaimer. It's not, hey, a normal, what's normal anyways, a person in their everyday routine constantly supplementing with melatonin.
Absolutely.
It's someone like yourself who is going against, your natural circadian rhythm. You're in different time zones. You have a lot of other external factors kind of contributing to why you're taking it. So I understand that more.
And another thing that I find would be really crucial to point on is this realm of supplementation and nootropics.
Okay.
And I think we don't see harm, as a society, we don't see harm in it because they're not prescribed to us. So we believe that we can just take whatever, whenever. And I would advise people to caution themselves with doing things like that, because the only real difference between a supplement and an actual prescription drug is one is FDA approved,
right,
and one isn't. So that's a really good way to really think about it. And Peter Attia is someone who I look up to, and he says that as well. So that's really important, because I just see, especially now during the pandemic, people are saying just filling up on so many different vitamins and minerals and supplements that they don't generally need, A, and then B, this supplementation industry, there's a fine line between quality and what's not good. And I know for a fact that there are and I'm never going to put anybody out there, but there are a lot of different supplement companies that are just putting supplements out there that are, they may say B12, but they're caked with so many other things that are really not good for you. So if anybody is, I am not endorsed by any supplement companies. I would just say caution, like look up where they're manufactured.
Of course, due
so
diligence.
So back to sleep. Another supplement that I've used, which I really do like, is GABA. So gamma aminobutyric acid. It is a neurotransmitter. It's an amino acid, and it is the chief inhibitory neurotransmitter. So
meaning what?
So it inhibits the action of. So when we're active and our nervous system is stimulated, we have low levels of GABA, so we may want to supplement with GABA to inhibit that synapse. So
gotcha. Okay.
Yeah. And so basically, in hindsight, what does that do? It calms down the nervous system. So if you're one of those people who have got your mind's racing when you're on your pillow, it's like, you may want to supplement with GABA to kind of slow down the thoughts in your brain and just kind of get your nervous system a bit settled. And again, I would obviously, check with your physician, but that's another one that people ask me about.
A few things popped in my head as you're describing this, especially in the supplementation world, and just now better understanding what's going on up here and how it really makes everything else down here function. I'll make a personal statement. I have for a long time been going through the philosophy of I need more to do more. I need more energy. I need more caffeine. I need more of like all my cylinders firing so that I can do the work, to work, to live. But I recently have been kind of playing around with, I'm a big man of ritual and a lot of things that I do, just, you can call them naturally, of, same go to bed time, same rise time, just very aware of biofeedback.
Yeah.
Thank you. Through years of trying to pay attention to my body, but then also through things in my diet and supplementation. And I've been playing around recently with, can I at least have the same level of productivity, if not maybe even squeeze out more, by not stimulating myself? And I will always love a great combination of caffeine and L-theanine. Of course, nothing will beat staying hydrated and good quality, consistent sleep. But I've actually been staying on cue with supplements, finding that calming aids and things to kind of slow me down physiologically are actually, I'm actually able to keep my brain running, not just constantly, but more fluid and kind of on my own timeline. And then even more importantly, when I want my brain to go to sleep, when I want it to calm down, it actually has the ability to later on. So instead of flooding my body and with stimulants and things that we may know to, a lot of nootropics, to increase cognition and focus and all these things, and some even coupled with, stimulants like caffeine, it'll get the job done that way. But we kind of have a toll to pay later on because our brains are constantly still running.
Have that down effect.
Yeah, I guess my long-winded way of just asking or stating, is that true with, your expertise in neuroscience, by actually kind of allowing a calmer state of being, can we really tap into more brain potential?
Well, look, I think what you're alluding to is when we are on the, like I was explaining before, with the sympathetic nervous system, which is the arousal, and then the parasympathetic system, which is the calm state. What happens is when we are hyper aroused, and we're like this, and that may be due to a specific event, something may have upset us, or we may have taken a stimulant, for example, which activates different neurons in the sympathetic nervous system. It activates, so we're really hyper aroused. What happens is, vision-wise, is you go into this state, your pupils dilute, and you go into this state of you're not actually able to take in the information that you've got. You're really focused on everything on the outside world. Gets very blurry, and then you become really focused on this one thing. And actually, David Huberman, who is, I would say, my idol in neuroscience, and someone I consider a mentor and a friend, and he's the one that really taught me about this through his work, and he does a lot of work on vision. And he was the one that, really showed me that when you are in that state, so your pupils dilute, and so you can only focus on this one thing. So everything else becomes really, really blurred. He describes it as portrait mode on your phone.
Exactly.
And you can't really learn anything or get into that learning state. Okay, so when you really correct the system and go into a more calm state, then your pupils constrict, and then that's where you are able to be calm and therefore concentrate and focus and learn more and retain more.
You said it better. Yeah, absolutely. That's the kind of the mechanics of what I guess I was experiencing.
So and then what happens when you're, and let's just take a bit more of a step back. What happens when you're learning more and you're staying on task? You're happy with yourself, right?
Yeah.
You're activating this reward system, which
positive feedback loop.
Positive feedback, which is the dopamine reward system, which dopamine is a molecule, and it's secreted by an area in the brainstem called the substantia nigra. And it gets secreted during moments of when you complete a task, you reward yourself with dopamine. And I was actually first introduced to this molecule and the amazing effects of it when I interviewed Dr. I think it's David Lieberman, and he wrote this book called The Molecule of More, and I interviewed him probably, I think, 2 years ago now. Absolutely wonderful, and he's really obsessed with this one molecule and what it can do to the human body. So what you're experiencing, just to circle back, is you're experiencing, why am I so productive? It's like this system because it's like dopamine, they call it neural energy. You do a task and you think, wow, I'm so happy I did that, because it's further towards your goal. So you reiterate to your brain, I'm getting further towards my goals and my vision. So it gives you this boost of dopamine, so you want to do it again. You want to keep doing it again, and that's why they call it the neural fuel. And they're the real beautiful things about the brain. It's not these things, it's the man-made rocks. That's what I call them. I don't know how else to describe it. It's what Mother Nature or God or whoever it is that you believe in gave us with. We were gifted with sunlight. We were gifted with the ability to sleep, with the ability to move, change our behavior. These are the beautiful things that we were given to us. And I think through science, we're unlocking all different other dimensions. But then there's also this crazy thing where humans are so impatient that they want to fix it with a pill, and that's where it becomes not beautiful. And if I can do anything, it's to show the world that you don't have to go and, load yourself up with pills. You don't have to go and buy, you really don't have to be sitting in a cold ice bath. Like, you don't have to have a good performing brain, but it's nice. You don't have to be spending money on gels to activate. I've seen a gel being advertised lately that activates the vagus nerve. It's
interesting.
It upsets me.
That's a new one on me.
Yeah, it upsets me. Because if you've ever been in ER, you know that your vagus nerve is activated all the time. You can activate it by eating or talking. So it's so that's, I think there's a real fine line, and so that's what I really want everybody to know.
Do you think we're at a place with the sciences and understanding neuroscience in general of being able to kind of create a protocol to train this on a regular basis? Outside of getting quality sleep and outside of all the things we've been talking about, can we build out, a neuroscience program? Can we build out, train your brain, for these exact reasons, and these are the results? Yeah,
and again, that's what the Neuro Athletic method is. It's how can we train your brain to become better at whatever it is that you're trying to do. So one of the things that we use during the Neuro Athletic method is we're working right now with a company. It's called FitLight, and they've developed a product in which I believe is the best on the market, and they're reaction training lights. When I first caught eye on them, I think it was probably 3 years ago, 2017, early 2017, I thought, is this just for players, like soccer players, to run to the light and react faster? But what I found as I looked further into the science, the science behind the light, I would say, is it activates so many different areas of the brain, and you can be using them with, I've used them with stroke patients, getting them to, my father actually a year ago on New Year's Eve, so almost literally 12 months ago, he had a right temporal infarct. Infarct is a stroke in the right side of his brain, and he lost nerve function from his elbow down and from his knee down. I was using the fit lights on him to really activate the neural system, the part of the brain that says move your right leg in response to the green light, in response to a stimulus.
Okay.
So they can be used for so many different things, and we're using them with our players to not just for memory recall, but for attention, for reaction, for absolutely everything. So that's one really great thing that we're using right now in our programs.
Where for kind of call it the everyday person, someone that is just I'm just looking to just improve my wellness. I'm just here to add some, I like to be here for the long haul of life, have increase my quality of life. Where does neuroscience play a role for them? I mean, of course, we would love all to get better sleep, but outside of athleticism, where does neuroscience benefit the everyday person?
So you can think of neuroscience as brain health.
Okay.
We're all looking after our health. We all know that if we adopt certain habits with our food intake, we all know to prevent obesity, we can't overeat.
Right.
So we know what we're doing for our body. So what can we do to have a better brain other than, eating well, for example? There's certain diets. There's a lot of people who are pro-vegan for the brain, and then people who are, you don't have to be vegan for the brain. So it's adopting what's good for you, what's going to make you happy when it comes to your nutrition, adopting practices such as meditation, which helps calm the nervous system down. I practice Vedic meditation. I went and did a course on it back in 2016 to really understand the effects of it and practice it. Doing a lot of things every single day consistently, like even if you want to adopt a brain-body-based exercise, something as simple as getting a tennis ball and throwing it at the wall and timing yourself for 1 minute. You just have to keep hitting it to the wall and reacting to it. It's actually quite harder than
throw
what
it
you
against
think.
the wall and catch it?
Yep,
or just
overhand. Throw it, overhand, catch it, and then you go, okay, great, I hit a minute. Then maybe do right hand, left hand, left hand.
Have you seen that new headband tennis ball?
A lot of the boxers are using that. So that's where you can start. And then if you really want to get a bit further into it, maybe throwing it with your right hand and lifting the left leg up.
Oh, okay.
So now
so
what you're doing so what you're doing there is you're balancing. And we know that there's an area in the brain, it's called the little brain, it's the cerebellum. It sits right underneath the brain. They call it the little brain. It actually
It looks like a little brain, yeah.
Yeah, it's beautiful. It's my favorite part of the brain, but that's really responsible for our balance and our coordination. So you're activating different systems of the body, no matter different areas of the brain and systems of the brain that you may normally not use. That's why over time things atrophy. So if you want to be training for this thing called longevity,
thing called life.
Yes, and life, and maybe live to be a centenarian and go to 100, and just be able to have a conversation with your grandkids at that age, which is, I think, a really beautiful thing to want at that age. Just to be able to walk around and talk to your grandkids. You want to start adopting methods as of now. I always say that from 25 onwards, you are responsible for your own brain. You go through this thing called adult neuroplasticity, and you have to take your brain under consideration. You are responsible for it, and the way you react to certain things, whether it's in an argument, is your responsibility.
I love it.
It's your responsibility to learn what fires you up, what fires your nervous system up, that makes you angry, that makes you sad, depressed, anxious, and how do you combat those? And people say, oh, you must just be great. I'm like, no, I do certain practices in my life to mitigate what I already know I am prone to. Certain things that I see that may spark something that happened 15 years ago in my childhood. You have to practice that so you don't fire up at somebody, and so you don't get sad and depressed.
That's amazing. That's I recently went through an experience like that as well, and kind of recognizing that is such as an important part of the work of health and wellness, of health and fitness, as really anything else, I think, because I was able to kind of catch myself in, I was having, speaking of, kind of an emotional response, a very traumatic emotional response to something about my father. It was like this new kind of memory link thing that I had. And I was like, oh, this explains so much for what I was going through in my life. And it was now being in the position to not only catch myself in that experience, but to not suppress it, but to allow my brain, my head, and my heart, and my whole body to go through it, but to be present for every part of that journey.
Yeah.
And then be aware of that timeline, but just come to my own logical conclusion of this is what needs to happen. Like, I need to allow the brain and these memories and all these things to fire and to process and to kind of like go through that journey with it, so that I can, just allow a system to complete its function.
Yeah.
You know? It's pretty powerful.
Yeah, and there's a lot of therapeutic benefits to come of this, meaning things like having a gratitude practice and really appreciating the fact that you're here. Like in my gratitude practice, I'm always thanking my parents. And health. They're the two things that I really am thankful for, because when you're in my field and you do see, and like right now, it's just hearing you talk about your father, and because I'm writing a paper on it, it is, and knowing that 95% is sporadic, it makes you think. So just having the ability to sit here and talk to you and watching the sun almost set is really something that I embody in my gratitude practice. And one more last tip, but obviously before we wrap this up, something that I think is really useful for everybody is journaling.
Yes.
It's really good for your brain as well.
Yeah.
We want to get something concrete. We want to get whatever is happening in our heads. So it's a really therapeutic process to just write it down. You don't even have to have a practice of, you just can literally put your pen to paper.
Just brain dump.
Just get rid of it.
Yeah.
And that can have a calming effect as well.
Absolutely. I mean, we could do a whole episode just on that. But getting to the end here, again, I want to recognize your work and thank you so much for not allowing, for a lot of people, we would view injury, we would view that loss of identity, that life change. We would view that as, well, that was it, and most people don't push past that. But you did. So I'm glad that you did. And, I think our greatest realizations and our greatest work and our greatest potential lies on the other side of that thing that either will stop us or will become our new identity, will become our catalyst. But before we get to my final question, since I have such an expert here, we mentioned it earlier. We talked about something called nootropics. And I'll kind of summarize everything we've been talking about. There are a lot of nuggets in here that someone can implement in a quote all natural way. It's just, understanding the body, instilling new practices, and then just consistency. But there are other things. We were talking about melatonin, but there are other things, like nootropics that we can use to stimulate it more, with not like caffeine, not having that kind of tax on the central nervous system. It's not overstimulating. But I'll say that things like nootropics can, for me personally, can allow more potential to happen when you are, fully aware of what you're taking and, in a much more intentional state. What are your thoughts on nootropics? Are they real? Are they fact? Are they fiction? What is the neuroscience application of nootropics?
Yeah, so I've implemented many protocols to with nootropics, and obviously, like I said, first and foremost, there is benefit in some area, but it's very individualized. Okay, everything is individualized, and you know this because you're wearing your. I see you wearing your continuous glucose monitor.
Yeah.
Meaning, and then the reason I bring that up is because the way that your body would respond to eating a blueberry may be different to the way my body responds. Meaning, we're two different people, but that blueberry is the same. So with nootropics, we're all going to have a different effect on them. Now, there are some that are completely useless, and it's just you're just putting rubbish in your body, and then there's some that there is merit, like you said, L-theanine, especially if you're having caffeine, is really great. Magnesium threonate.
Lion's mane's another one I use a lot. I'm a big fan of.
Yeah, me too. I actually I was using the drops in my not the powdered form, and again, so many more. And I've got some on my social media account that I did a study with lion's mane, so that's a really great one for really unwinding, and a lot of the medicinal mushroom section. I love them, but I wouldn't comment on them because it's not my area of expertise. One that I grew to really love this year was glutathione. And what I learned, obviously, as well, which was a failure in that, is you have to take a liposomal glutathione. So you can get that, or you can take N-acetylcholine, which is the precursor to glutathione, to really activate that. That's really great for neural energy, like I said. You can go into the science of that and go and research that yourselves as well. So there is merit. But what I will say is, don't believe in marketing that is out there telling you. I'm trying to not burst anything, but the words that I try and stay away from are hack, limitless. I try and stay away from those words because it produces a false false expectation to the end consumer. And it's, if we want everybody to be happy and having a better performing brain, really understand first and foremost, what do you want in life? What is your outcome? What is your vision? What do you need to get there in terms of neural energy? Are you a night worker? See, that changes everything if you're a night shift worker.
Absolutely.
If you're, there's many physicians out there who are right now working crazy hours. They're completely different. What they're secreting, what they're losing would be completely different from somebody else. So everyone's different. So it's really understanding what is it that you want. Go and do the necessary tests. Look up with your physician. Go and do all the tests that you need to do. See what you're maybe deficient in first, and then get on a protocol after that with supplementation.
100%.
And take it really seriously. Don't just say, don't just go to your local supermarket and pick up whatever.
Could not agree more.
Yeah.
Well, it's been a pleasure having you here. So much
Thank
of
you
your
so
work
much.
and these studies, I'll definitely be able to link down in the show notes, like I said, for everybody. Beyond this conversation, no matter what we are absorbing, no matter what we're learning, we need to do our due diligence. We need to vet things. We need to be in communication with our physician, with our coach, anybody who has the expertise, and especially at the medical level. Absolutely. Know your baseline, but communicate with experts, but also always pay attention to yourself. You will always be your greatest coach, because our brains have this thing called biofeedback, have this way of whispering to us so often of what it needs, what it wants, what it doesn't. We just need to get better at paying attention to it. Yeah. I think.
You said that right.
My final question, I mentioned earlier the whole mantra of ever forward. From my father, and I'm really excited to follow you with your work with ALS. Absolutely. That was his mantra, kind of passed down to us. And I say living a life ever forward means becoming more aware of all these things in our life, of the human potential, of optimization, of awareness of key levers and things that we can manipulate internally and externally to keep us moving forward, to live a life ever forward.
Yeah.
What does that mean to you? How would you say that you live a life ever forward?
That's a big question. Living a life ever forward to me would mean taking the necessary protocols and understanding who I am, understanding what I want, and living in truth to that. So meaning we can't fake where we're at, not just in life. I mean, I know we do, and I find a lot of that in the United States. But it's not that. It's don't lie about where you are with your biochemistry. You know,
interesting.
Yeah. Know where you are, know where you stand, and understand your brain, understand your downfalls and your strengths and your weaknesses, and just work with that. Don't think that you should be doing what somebody else is doing when it comes to medicine, neurology, and your body.
You can't outthink your own science.
There you go.
That's for sure.
That's a really good way of putting it.
Yeah, you can't outthink your brain. You can't outthink your body. We have a lot of ways of masking that and thinking that we're outsmarting it for sure, but it'll always catch up with us.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, Louisa, again, it's been having you on. It's been a great privilege and honor. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I can't wait to keep watching your work and your science. Where can someone go to learn more about what you're doing right here, right now?
You know what? I'm very active on my social media account. It's the Diamond Boss.
Which I wanted to ask you, where did that come from?
Where did that name
the
come
Diamond
from?
Boss, yeah.
It's, everyone's like, why do you do
I was expecting
jewelry?
like the Brain Boss or like the
So my coach said to me on the very first day of me maybe the first few weeks, he saw me in the pool and he stopped me and he pulled me out. This was like at age 17, 18, 19, around that age, and he said, I'm going to turn you into a diamond. I said, what does that mean? And he said, I think you have the ability to race for Australia. I said, come on now. I said, that's not me. And he said, no. He goes, if you listen to me, if you listen to everything I'm going to do, and I'm going to give you, if you really take it into consideration, do everything right, I'm going to put so much pressure on you. He said that when you get to Beijing, the world title that you want to go to, the world championships, that's when you will be a diamond. He said, but you have to listen to me. And so when I made it, he's like, he goes, you're your very own diamond boss. I said, oh my gosh, I went and got a diamond. And it's like, I don't put that story out there, but maybe I should, because people are asking me if I'm in jewelry and I'm not. But thank you so much.
Your content is amazing.
well.
Absolutely. My pleasure, my honor. And
thank you.
thank you so much.